welcome to Anime Adventures. I'm Elise Baughman, the voice of Pin from Dragon Ball GT, and I am with Joel McDonald, director at Gearbox, and...
I play Aoyama in My Hero Academia.
That is right, and many other characters. And this is the show where I bring you interviews with voice actors and directors and others as I travel to conventions and to recording studios, and that's where we are right now. I am bringing you an interview straight from Gearbox Studios, so we will be right back with an interview with Joel. So I am with Joel. We are at Gearbox, so I think we should start there, talking about Gearbox.
Cool.
So you've been here about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And what is your official title? I love this.
They let me pick my own, so I am the Gearbox Software's very first V-Overlord.
V-Overlord.
Yes.
I love that. And what does a V-Overlord do?
A lot of stuff.
Really?
It's true. I help run auditions, draft audition sides. I submit those auditions to all the local agencies and some non-local agencies, depending on how big a net we're looking to cast. Then I get all the auditions back. I dig through, I pick out the finalists. I sit with the narrative team and discuss whether or not these actors are hitting the right notes that the writers are looking for. We trim down the finalists a little bit more. We take them to the creative director, anybody else that has a stake in that character or their area of the map, and we come to a decision together on casting. Then it's my job to get the contract signed, all that kind of stuff, get the actors scheduled, bring them in, and work with my engineer to get everybody recorded one after the other.
Wow, that's actually a lot. You ran through the list quickly.
Yes.
That's quite a process.
That's true.
Well, since we're at Gearbox, you've got some big things coming up, like maybe around September 13th.
Yeah, that's going to be fun, right? Yeah, that's going to be my first Gearbox official main game title that I've worked on. The first title that I released since I started here as a director, February, a while back.
And we should say it, just in case you don't know, Borderlands 3.
Borderlands
we should
3.
Announce it officially.
That's going to be cool.
Yes.
You should play it. It's fun. But yeah, so the very first title that I got to work on when I got here was the fifth DLC for Borderlands 2, which is Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary.
Because you got here a year and a half ago, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And to work on this project?
Gearbox had never really done all of their own internal recording and directing and everything on site. There had been previous games where a lot of it was done on site. Battleborn, I think, was the first game where a lot of most of everything was recorded in-house. But previously, everything had been outsourced to other studios. And so I came on to, initially work on Borderlands 3, but I'm going to be touching on just about everything that comes through here, and I'm really excited about it.
Okay, so Borderlands 3, as we said, being released September 13th, 2019. So tell me about that. I mean, it's got to be exciting in the office, in the studio.
It's been, we're so glad that we can talk about it now, because for the longest time when I was working here, when I first started here, and a lot of other people that have worked here a lot longer, where it's like we all know what's going on here, but we can't tell the world, and we're all fans of the game too, and like we just want to scream like it's so cool. But now that we can finally talk about certain parts of it, like people around here just walking on clouds a lot. Like it's really fun, I was not much of a gamer before I started here, and I'm actually pretty terrible now. I mean, like I rock at Dr. Mario, but that's about where my skill level ends. But when I was interviewing here, I started playing the Borderlands franchise to learn the characters and learn kind of what the humor of the world was and kind of what the tone was. And I absolutely fell in love with the franchise. Like, and I would play it even if I got fired today or never got hired or whatever. It's an amazing franchise. I love the tone and the gameplay and the feel. But yeah, I started with Tales from the Borderlands, and then Borderlands 1, pre-sequel 2, and started playing through all the DLCs, and yeah, like it's just really, really neat to get to play in that world. Like I've always wanted to work on the side of the side of the directing table, I guess, in video games anyway. But like to get to work on a franchise that is so well loved, and rightly so. Like we're all so crazy happy here.
That's pretty cool. And how awesome that you actually ended up liking it. That's a bonus when you're working on video games.
Do you play a lot of games?
I don't.
You don't play a lot of games. But one of the most fun things about people in the industry about playing games is that every once in a while, and sometimes a lot, you hear people you know.
Oh, yes.
And I love that. Like I was playing like one of the Batman games or whatever, and every once in a while I'd kill one of the enemies and be like, Patrick Sykes. It's really fun. And especially since, Borderlands was mostly recorded locally, like I know a lot of the cast. cast. And so like playing through is like, oh, that's Josh. Oh, that's Eric. Oh,
See, I need to start playing because I have so many friends.
I'm sure,
I've voiced in games and I have friends who do it. So I think that would be a cool aspect.
And it's really fun, too, when you hear a character and you're like, oh, I want to know more. Like, who's this actor? This is fantastic. I love this character. And then you Google it and you're like, that's them? Oh, my God. Like, I had no idea. Like, we know a lot of very talented people.
Yeah. See, I do that with shows that I watch. I'll be watching something and Google it and go, oh, my gosh, I didn't know he was the voice or she was the voice. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I can see how that would be the same with video games.
It's really neat. And then just getting to shoot your friends in the face over and over, like it's adds a fun element.
When they call, you're like, I got you, by the way, the other day.
The first time I was in the game and I got a text from, I think it was Eric Vale, and texted me, he was like, I just shot you in the face. And I was like, what? Oh, okay.
Oh, I got that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They could take out some pinup aggression against you in the video game.
I'm sure there's a lot out there.
There's probably some of that. Well, while we're on video games, what I know about, but I always find fascinating, and I would love to hear your perspective, because he has been a director at Funimation for 11 years before you came here. Talk about the difference between dubbing, like when you're doing a project at Funimation, compared to doing a video game here at Gearbox.
Well, I think the main difference between VO for a dubbing setting and prelay VO, which is for most other industries, especially video games, is the focus on timing isn't as much of an issue, because like sometimes like in the anime world you can get a perfect read and you love it, but it ain't perfect because it doesn't fit.
Doesn't match the flaps.
It's got to match the flaps, and so you've got to like it's like I always likened it to like swimming with weights on, like to get ready for a big meet or something, because like you've got to, yes, you still have to act, you have to create this character, you have to hit these emotional moments, but you have to do it within the confines of this very specific timing and pre-existing animation. And so it's being very, very creative in a very refined and confined setting.
Yes.
And so when you start to move into prelay, where the voiceover kind of tends to come before the animation, or at least a lot of the animation is finalized, you have a lot more freedom. And so you get to make those strong choices and take risks and do all the things that actors love to do, but you're not bound by this pre-existing animation that defines what you can and can't do. Of course, a lot of games you want to keep the gameplay snappy and moving along, and so pacing is still, somewhat of a factor. But there's a lot of room to wiggle and play and experiment. And that's the other thing is sometimes you might want to ad-lib a line or something like that, but in anime or what you don't really have that luxury.
Yeah.
You don't have time to squeeze it in, and even if you did, it's not what the character said. But here, the actors get to start playing and experimenting, and like I said, same thing with the writers. Like that, sometimes they'll start to write in that direction. They hear something they like, or a joke happens. Like there's one of the more famous moments in Borderlands history was Damian Clark as Handsome Jack ad-libbing a line about eating pretzels that he did not enjoy because he didn't realize they were coming back from break, and he had a mouthful of pretzels, and all of a sudden they were rolling, and it was hilarious, and so they kept it.
Really?
Yeah, and it's great. It's one of our more iconic moments.
Hey, how did pretzels suck? How's your day been, buddy? We haven't really talked much since I left you for dead. Hey, you think you'll freeze to death out there? No, probably not. Bandits will get you first. My day? Been pretty good. Just bought a pony made of diamonds. Yeah, because I'm rich. So, that's cool. Goodbye.
I love hearing those backstories that you wouldn't necessarily know even just playing the game.
Right.
And will you also explain how, when you're doing the video games, they use the facial expressions of the actors sometimes and write that in, or not write it in, but draw it into the character?
Sure, yeah. Well, we never use an actor's likeness, of course.
Right.
Not without their permission anyway.
Yeah.
But we have, for certain characters, had them come in and do facial registration dots. We will do facial mo-capture. So they'll be wearing this weird helmet with a camera, like at a really unflattering angle, just mostly like right up the nose. And then they have just these dots around their mouth and cheeks and nose and stuff to line up to the model. And so that we mostly just use the mouth movement to help make the mouth of the character look like it's much more natural and more in line with what they're doing. And the animation team works with us really closely on that, and it's really fun. We don't use it in every single instance, but in more important cut scenes and stuff like that, it helps to bring about a level of naturalism and realism in the animation that was previously very difficult. And I'm sure it's not easy now, but it helps. It's fun.
Yeah, I always find that fascinating.
Yeah. And the actors love it too. Like they got to sit and get these dots put on their faces for several minutes, and then they've got to kind of act in a very strange environment with this camera and everything, but they get a kick out of it. It's
Yeah,
fun.
I would think so. I've never done that, but I would think it'd be cool. Now, let's switch gears and talk about Funimation, because you were there 11 years.
Yep.
You're a writer and a director. So how was that experience?
It was really fun. It was my introduction into voiceover. It was my introduction into anime. I had never seen anime.
Oh, interesting.
And I've said that at conventions and stuff before, and I have almost been booed off the stage
I
because
was wondering,
it's not a popular opinion, but I wasn't brought on because I was the biggest fan of anime. I was brought on because of my experience in acting and directing, and so and I was telling you before we started.
Yes, we did talk a little before.
We were talking, but yeah, my experience with anime was almost none, but I think I was brought on more for my ability to work with actors. So, I started working with Colleen Klinkenbeard trained me and everything, and I started working in the writing side and actually working in as a director and writing and occasionally as an actor at the same time. I got a really well-rounded view of what every person in the process was looking for.
Oh, I bet.
And that made it really, it was kind of a crash course in the medium, but I actually had to tell one of my producers when I first started, I was like, okay, I'm about to start my very first series. I've never actually seen an anime that I liked. So I was like, what should I watch to show me what's the best of the medium? What do I need to see that kind of really would open my eyes to what's possible here? And he gave me Beck, Mongolian Chop Squad, which is a phenomenal show.
Did Chris Bevins direct that?
I believe he did. And then it was Greg Ayers and Eric Vale and Brina Palencia, who sings like a freaking angel.
She's wonderful.
And it was just a fantastic show, and I was gonna.
So that was your first anime to watch as an introduction?
Yeah, and it was and I planned to watch it over the course of about a week, because that's about how long I had before my series started. But I think I blasted through the whole thing in about 48 hours.
Really?
And I couldn't turn it off.
So you totally binge watched?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and it was great. And it's like people who say I don't like anime, that's anime is a medium, and so it's like saying I don't like movies. There are movies you don't like, but there are movies that you do.
That's true.
And anime is so broad. There's something for everybody.
Yes. Yeah. I know. I could believe that it wasn't popular for you to say at conventions, but as I've been doing conventions, which I'm relatively new to conventions, I love that some people have been watching anime forever, and some people have been watching for 6 months or a year. And in general, I find that people are very welcoming and open, and they're like, "Oh, come join our party. We love anime. It's a team. It's a group. It's a family."
It's very much so. I love how inclusive conventions are, and the cosplayers especially, man. Those people put some time and effort into their hobby, into their craft, and but yeah, it's I love how it doesn't matter if you fit the description of the character. Everyone gets to play in any skin they want.
Yes.
And that's really cool, and and it being such a warm and welcoming and inviting atmosphere of people that I'm sure maybe some people in our youth and high school and stuff might have been kind of outcast for what we were into, or the kind of people but you go to a convention and it's a safe space for everyone to just do what you enjoy.
I know. I've loved going to the conventions. Yeah. So, and how long have you been doing conventions? Speaking of conventions, because that's where I saw you.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah, here in Dallas.
Well, let's see. If I started at Funimation about 12-ish years ago, my first convention was probably about a year after that. So.
Oh, okay. So quite a while.
Yeah. And my first one was SakuraCon in Seattle, and I went with J. Michael Tatum to promote Heroic Age, which was an anime we worked on together. And if you haven't been to a convention with J. Michael Tatum, oh my God,
He's
do
hilarious.
that. It was really
I know.
neat.
I interviewed him. He is hilarious.
He's a fun guy.
So let's talk about acting. We've got to talk about acting because you've done so many cool characters. Tell us some of the ones that you may be best known for.
Let's see. Meow in Space Dandy is one of my favorites.
Which you also directed, right?
I directed half of it. Yeah.
Half of it, okay.
Me and Zach Bolton kind of co-directed. So I'd do an episode, he would do an episode. Oh, it's fantastic. He's great. That one was great. It was on Tsunami and Adult Swim and everything. I love that one. I'm Zeref in Fairy Tail. Kuma in One Piece, which I also directed a lot of. Brief and Penny and Stocking. There's a bunch.
There are a bunch, yes. I looked you up. There's probably hundreds.
I don't know. I've been very lucky.
Yes, you have. Well, lucky talent, whatever you want to call it. Because you've been acting for a long time, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, I've been for voiceover, about that same 11-year period or 12 years, I guess now. But I've been acting since I was about 7, so I've got a little bit more than 30 years experience in the acting world. Yeah.
And you went to school for it. That
yes,
helps too.
Sure. Right.
And one question, I know as an actor, you probably get asked this a lot. I get asked this a lot. What tips do you have for actors? But I heard something that I would love for you to repeat. Something that you learned from a drama teacher that you say you kind of take with you to every audition. It's like 4 or 5 tips.
Yeah,
you know where I'm going with this?
Of course,
yes,
of course.
I would love you to tell this again.
Sure.
Because it's really great.
I think, well, first off, anyone who works in the acting or entertainment industry for any amount of time will find a mentor. And
yes.
it's, even if it's not someone who like takes a personal, coaching position over you or whatever, someone that you look up to, someone that you listen to and respect. And I was really fortunate to have a teacher in high school named Marilyn Miller. And it remains, I think about her constantly. She died several years ago. She was one of the most influential women I've ever known. She taught me several things that I take with me all the time. First is it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. I love that one.
That's a good one.
She was good.
Used that before.
She was a demon. She was great. But she taught me the 4 rules of auditioning, and they're very simple, very common sense, but they're very true. And the longer I work in the industry, the more I realize how true they are. But it's show up, show off, shut up, and get out. And if you follow those 4 rules, you will have a pretty decent chance of booking work. But each one of them sounds really simple on its face. But I do actually teach a lot of acting classes and workshops and stuff, and usually in a group setting with 10 or so students. But we'll spend about 3 hours working on those 4 rules. Yeah.
I think that's why I liked it, because it sounds simple, but yet it's so profound.
Yep.
Well,
it's one of those things that because when I used to do, when I first started at Funimation, I would do open call auditions and see about 35 new actors a day.
Oh, wow.
And
That's a lot.
bring people in 15-minute slots, see what you got, pick 3 characters and we'll play around, find your range, find your voice and all that. But I kept seeing people, well, first off, I realized that these people were not professional actors. They were anime fans that put their name on a website, which is great. We definitely found some usable talent,
sure.
But they didn't have experience and backgrounds in entertainment or acting or anything. And so when I started there, I switched gears and we started auditioning professional actors. And we'd still see 35 or so a day. And we went from finding a couple of usable people to mostly usable people. Out of the 35, we most days we'd found 15 to 30 that we could put in the booth for something. And so it became much more valuable. But I still was seeing these professional actors fall into the same traps that the not professional actors were doing.
Really? What's an example of something that you always saw over and over?
Well, the first rule is show up. Showing up is loaded, because when do you show up? And so typically an actor or a director or an agent will tell you want to shoot for about a 15-minute window right before your audition time. But if you show up less than 15 minutes before your audition time, then you don't have as much time to go over your audition sides. Or what if you're running late or you get stuck in traffic or anything like that? So that's a risk that you run. You want to be able to be as prepared as you can for a cold read. You don't want to go in over-rehearsed or anything.
Right.
But then at the same time, you can show up way too early. So when I first started, I was warned about the record holder for the person who showed up the earliest to their audition.
What was this?
You wouldn't take a guess?
An hour.
5
5 hours?
5.5 hours.
5.5 hours?
5.5 hours before and at that point,
what did they do?
They just hung out in the lobby and just stared at people.
Oh my goodness.
So and I even asked when somebody was telling me that, I was like, well, were they any good? And they were like, nobody knows. No one remembers anything about their audition. The only thing they remember is that they showed up 5.5 hours early. But I hadn't been working there long before the record was shattered.
Shattered?
Shattered.
How do you show up more than 5.5 hours?
You show up 5 days before your audition.
And do you camp out it's an iPhone sale, or what do you do?
This guy got the call to come in for his very first audition, and he got really, really excited. And so rather than wait for his scheduled time, which he had just gotten off the phone saying, hey, it's going to be Monday at this time, he just got in his car and drove up there. And so yeah, but even professional actors would kind of make that mistake of wanting to make a good impression and showing up 3 hours early saying, hey, I'm ready to work. arc. Like, no, you're not. You haven't auditioned yet. Like, and so, like, I always tell people that you want to create the impression that you are a working actor, and this is one of several auditions you have that day.
You're very busy.
Very busy.
Lots of stuff going on.
Things to do.
Assistant has you booked many times throughout the day.
Right. So showing up within a reasonable amount of time, being able to get ready and everything like that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
It was fun, yeah. And again, I don't remember if he was any good.
So the fact that I showed up like 3 hours early today for the interview was not good?
No, it was great. It was great.
For the record, I did not.
No.
Oh my goodness. So you teach too?
Yeah. I've been teaching voice acting classes in a group setting for 6 or so years. I did a lot of it with Chris Rager, who's the voice of Mr. Satan and Torg. Yeah, so you did.
Yes, I've interviewed them as well.
Josh. Yeah. Chris and I used to work together a lot. I've also I've done some classes at Starman Studios in Farmers Branch. I've been talking with maybe doing something with Sound Cadence one of these days. I love them.
Love them.
I'd love to get out to do some stuff with Sonny Strait's workshop out in Denton. He's just a phenomenal guy. He's always got interesting stuff going on. Yeah. And have you seen his artwork?
Oh, his artwork is fantastic too.
That guy's hogging all the talent. Like, it bothers me.
Isn't he?
And I've got my very first, so I've taught acting workshops for years and years, but I've got my very first directing class coming up at the end of August. So,
oh, really? Okay. Well, you'll have to let me know the details, and I'll post about it in the show notes.
Will do.
Yes. So if you're in the Dallas area, you definitely need to take from this guy. Directing, acting.
All of it.
All of
Whatever you want.
So fantastic. Now, we've talked about crazy stories from other actors. Do you have a story personally, like in the booth, at a convention, anything crazy?
Okay.
Or everything's perfection?
Well, everything's perfect all the time, but I will say, so what jumps to mind is one of my favorite shows that I ever worked on as a director was a show called Spice and Wolf.
Okay.
And it starred Brina Palencia and Jen Tatum. And it's one of those shows, here's the other thing I love about anime is that, like, sometimes you'll read the show description and you're like, no, that's so stupid. I'm not watching this. But then you watch it and you're like an episode and a half in and you're like, I can't stop. Like, I'm so hooked. So it's this show, and like the description or whatever, it's about, like, a man and a wolf girl explore economics in a medieval town. I'm like, I don't want to watch this. And like, next thing you know, I'm like, why isn't there more? Like, this is amazing. And it was fascinating. First off, you could just listen to Tatum and Brina talk forever anyway about anything. Like, they could read phone books, whatever.
Yes.
So we were, and it had a lot of comedy in it, but it was a very, I don't know if you could even call it a slice of life with the wolf girl and everything, but like, but there was a lot of exposition about that really teaches some really interesting things about economics and how money works. And anyway, it was great. But there was a lot of drama to it too, and especially between this very conflicted relationship between the two main characters. And at one point, Tatum had left a bomb for Brina. And we know what bombs are. He left a little joke line in there to mess with her. And I had forgotten about it because he'd recorded well prior. And Brina is in the booth and she is acting her heart out. She doesn't do anything halfway. And it's this very emotional scene where she's like screaming and crying and pounding on this guy's chest. And just like, she is, as an actor, just bearing her soul.
Yes.
And it was so intense, and just like the air was thick, like it was just so, it was great. And I look over and I see the engineer and he's kind of like smiling to himself. I'm like, what? And he goes, it's coming. And I remembered the bomb that Tatum had left. And I was like, shut it off right now. Quick, mute it. And he lunged for the button. He hit the button right in time. But you heard the first syllable of Tatum, and then it went quiet, and she finished the scene, and it was flawless, and it hit the flaps perfectly, and it was great. She was like, what was that? And so we played her the line, and it was in the middle of her, like, just this huge emotional breakdown, and Tatum had said, hey, now that we're on topic, you might want to get yourself checked. And it was hilarious, but she started laughing. She was like, if you had played that while I was doing that, I would never have worked with you again.
Oh, no.
She was in a pretty raw spot right there. But anyway.
My gosh. So do you have any cool stories that you did in the booth, like either as a director or actor, that we may not know just watching an anime that you could tell us about?
Well, a few things. One, I was really happy to, we were always experimenting with different ways to record and different fun elements we could work into shows. And one of my favorite shows that I worked on was Sergeant Frog. I love that one. It was really fun, wacky comedy. And the Japanese licensor had said, like, play with it, make it fun. Because if you translate every joke word for word and just plug it in English, it's not going to be funny. It loses the spontaneity. A lot of the Japanese references don't make sense. And so they were like, just like make it your own. Where the laughs are supposed to be, and keep the tone of the show the same, but like work in American pop culture references as opposed to Japanese ones and stuff. And so we got to experiment some, and it was really, and you don't get that much. But one of my favorite parts was Bruce Elliott plays the narrator, and there were various times throughout the series where he, as the narrator, would get really frustrated with what was going on screen. He was like, I don't want to do this anymore. He's like, this is a terrible show. It was really funny, and but at one point, Kararo, Todd Haberkorn's frog character, makes some stupid decision, and the narrator gets really frustrated, and we actually had him open the door of the booth, walk out, and go, that's it, I quit, and then slam the door. And so we were the first Funimation cue to be recorded from outside of the booth.
Really?
That was really fun. I liked that one.
That's interesting, because a lot of times you'd think, oh, this is done in some fancy way, or it's done in post. So that was literally him walking out.
I think we did a couple of takes. Like we did one on mic so that we could try it in post or whatever. But yeah, the one we used was him just leaving the booth. Yeah, it was great. Have you ever blacked out in the booth?
I have not. Have you?
Oh yeah.
You've blacked out from screaming so much?
Yeah, I know a few people who have. Actually,
really?
I didn't hit the ground, but like my vision went dark and like
the room spun and like I had to like grab a chair.
Really? What were you doing? Do you remember what you were recording?
It was Panty and Stocking. And so I played this character Brief, who was very high energy and just geek boy is what they called him. So kind of a higher young nerd voice. But there was a long scene where like I'm running through this football field or something like that. And it was like I think it was like a 1.5, 2 minute cue of like scream, line, running, panting, line, scream, line, and everything over and over. And I had already watched everything. We'd previewed with Colleen Klinkenbeard was directing.
Yeah.
And then she was like, just take a stab, see how far you can get. We'll punch in for the rest. No pressure. Like, all right. But about 45 seconds in, I was like, I'm still hitting these. Like, this is good. Like, I'm matching the flaps, like everything. And so, like, I'm taking short, shallow breaths whenever I can. But, like, I just got to keep going. And then I realized, like, oh, man, we are right near the end. But I can feel myself running out of air. But I'm like, no, push through. One solid take. You got this. And then, like, I got to the last of it. And I finished it. And I kind of took my first deep breath in a while, and I stood back up. I guess I'd gotten kind of on mic a little bit. But then, like, next thing I know, I hear Colleen in my headphones going, Joel, that was really tight. And I'm like, and the whole room spun, and like everything went gray, and but yeah, I've been in Walla sessions where no, I didn't fall. No,
but you were just like, whoa.
Yeah. No, but I was in a Walla session once where one of the actors blacked out because it was like a 3-minute, like I think it was even like a laughing cue or something like that. But like, at times you forget how much you're putting into it physically, because you get so into the emotion. But
that's crazy.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend it.
No, I'm gonna try to stay away from that.
Yeah.
But it's a good story. After the fact.
Sure,
yeah.
Right, yeah.
Sure.
I'll tell it.
Sure. Well, this has been so much fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Anytime.
And we may walk around some and take a tour. I want to see the studio a little
let's see what
bit.
there is to see.
Yeah, this is awesome. And I love your space in here. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's nice.
Well, thanks for watching. It's been so much fun visiting with Joel. You were, speaking of talent, speaking of soaking up all the talent, writer, director, guy who can go for 1 minute and 45 seconds and just barely black out.
Almost.
So thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll see you later. Bye.